Meet Janice Lintz, our next wonderful mentor. Say hello, Janice.
Hi.
Now, Janice is a very interesting person. She has done lots of interesting things, and I hope I can bring some of them out today. So tell me, Janice, where are you originally from?
Well, I've always been from New York. I originally was born in Brooklyn, New York, moved to Long Island, and then Manhattan, and now I'm back to Brooklyn, New York, which is a very different Brooklyn than when I left.
So do you enjoy living there?
I'm not here very often because I travel so frequently, which was part of my move to Brooklyn. But now I wouldn't know because I don't leave my apartment due to the pandemic.
Well, there's a lot of that going around, isn't there?
Yes.
So, as you were growing up and working in life, have you had a lot of mentors?
Yes, I have. I've been very fortunate.
Um, could you tell us about some of them? Like I hear there's a trio of them somewhere.
Yes. Well, I've had different mentors for different stages of my life. So I had mentors when, I was in high school and I was working at a luggage store. And I had this older woman, Mrs. Sirota, who mentored me in how to run a business and how to just, you know, be more entrepreneurial. And I always think of her as this incredible mentor. And now I have a group of three older women who have mentored me on hearing access. And it's been just amazing. They're just incredible. And then when I'm doing my travels, I have mentors who mentor me in travel. So I've been very fortunate to have mentors for different stages of my life and for different topics.
Now, do you feel that those mentors have been able to help you be successful, or have they just prepared you for the battles ahead?
I guess a combination of both. I think I have learned from them. They keep me in check. They're like a sounding board. Uh, I think people have really helped me become the person I am. I'm very grateful to all of them.
Now, you mentioned traveling. Something tells me that you do a lot of traveling.
Yes, I do. Although not lately, since for the last month, but yes, I'm an avid, voracious traveler.
Well, what turned you on to traveling at first?
Well, when I was younger, my grandmother and her siblings all traveled, and I would receive postcards with, these incredible exotic stamps and fancy shapes, in triangles and stickers. And I thought it was so cool. I'd watch this television show called Big Blue Marble that was on TV. I had pen pals from around the world. And I was just curious about the world and what was happening. And I wanted to see it. I wanted to learn about it. And so for me, my goal was to travel. My family traveled when we were younger, and I loved it. But the real turning point for me in traveling was when I did the iconic post-college backpacking trip when I graduated. That was a game changer. When I found out that the cheese I was eating was not real cheese, and the ice cream in the big rectangle box was really not ice cream compared to gelato, I realized I needed to see things for myself because my food was no longer reliable.
Well, how many countries have you visited?
I've been now to 139 UN countries plus the two observer states, and 194 countries, territories, and disputed nations using what's known as the Travel Century Club list.
Wow. Well, that puts you pretty much throughout the entire list. Do you have many more to go?
Yes, well, of the 139 plus two observer, there is 193 UN countries. So I have a decent amount still left to go. And I hope to continue traveling when the pandemic ends.
That's wonderful. Now, is there a special trick you use to do your traveling?
What do you mean? Oh, using frequent flyer points?
Yes.
Yes. So I have taken out, when I made a concerted effort to really up my game in my travel 2 years ago, um, prior to that, and for the last 5 years, I've been taking out credit cards to earn sign-up bonuses. And I took out 77 credit cards and earned about 2.7 million miles in sign-up bonuses.
That's a lot.
Yes. And I've been using those to fly around the world. So I rarely pay for flights. The only time I do is when there's small one-off airlines where it's not an effective use of points, because there are sometimes like short and cheap hopper flights. Like recently when I flew from Myanmar to Singapore using a airline like Jetstar, it doesn't make sense to then fly to Bangkok to go for the same route. It's just cheaper, and they're not part of an alliance. So I will pay for a flight like that. But my goal is to rarely pay for flights.
Something tells me there's many stories that you could tell along some of those interesting flights.
Yes, it's always an adventure, and it's just been an incredible opportunity that I'm very grateful for.
Now, I understand you're also very interested in hearing access. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my daughter has a hearing loss. And when my daughter was diagnosed when she was 2.5 years old, the first thing the doctor said to me was there were special schools for her. I was I was frustrated that the doctor had already lowered the bar before she even started. And that was unacceptable to me. And I decided it was easier to change the world than for me to lower my standards. And so I set out to change the world for our family.
That's a wonderful statement that you have. Would you say that one more time? It's easier to
Change the
change the
world.
world than to lower your standards.
Yes, because I was not going to lower, my idea of a special school was very different than what the doctor anticipated. And my daughter ultimately ended up going to a top private girls' school in New York City and to an Ivy League university. I don't think that's what the doctor anticipated. And it was unacceptable for me for a doctor to sit and lower this bar without knowing who my daughter was and not giving her a chance. And so it was really much easier for me to change hearing access around the country, or starting in New York and then around the United States, and now globally. While I'm traveling, I'm simultaneously changing hearing access while I travel, because it's the way you pay it forward. So I have meetings as I travel around the world to affect change globally.
Well, can you give us an example of some of the change that you brought about in hearing access?
Well, in New York City, the taxis now have induction loops, and so do the subway information booths. Most of the museums have the hearing access. I created a best practice model in New York City that I expanded around the country. So most of the significant hearing access projects you see in the United States are the result of my work or inspired by it. When you see induction loops in airports by Delta, I worked with Delta and brought that project. When you see captions on in-flight entertainment, that's from my working with and approaching Richard Branson and then Delta, and then submitting comments to the Department of Transportation, who ultimately mandated that in-flight entertainment had to have in-flight captions. And then that has had, one of the other areas I worked on was developing captioning standards, first with NBC. I had been on the FCC's Consumer Advisory Committee because I found out if you send enough letters complaining, people don't know what to do with you, so they stick you on committees. And so I complained a lot, so I got stuck on a lot of committees. And so from sitting on the committee, I was really frustrated by the poor quality captioning, in fact, on Trump's Apprentice, Martha Stewart Living. And I would document and meet with FCC commissioners, because here I was sending my daughter to a top girls' school, and she was learning poor spelling from watching television. And that was unacceptable to me. And we had to fix it. So I complained to NBC, contacted Bob Wright, who was then chairman of NBC, and he set up for me to work with someone within NBC, and we developed captioning standards that I then presented to the Association of National Advertisers, that they then developed, and we wrote a white paper of recommendations. And those are very similar to what the FCC ultimately adopted for captioning standards. And as a result, now you'll see quality captions on television, because previously there were no standards. And I had developed proof of concept that you could develop standards, and it wasn't that complicated. And
wow, you're a force of nature.
Well, you know what? I've been very lucky, as you say, working with incredible mentors, and also like a brain trust of people who have assisted me. This was never something I did on alone. And I had people who mentored me along the way to help me in areas that are just beyond my skill set. That how would I, as a mother, possibly know all of these different things? But people helped me along the way, and so you pay it forward.
That sounds very reasonable. So what do you have in the future? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking on a personal level to visit every country in the world. And that's one of my personal goals. And then on hearing access, my goal is to eliminate the stigma for people with hearing loss. And one of the areas that I'm hoping to change is to add telecoils to things like AirPods, so that people with hearing loss, when a person purchases an AirPod, and if it has a telecoil, and then later when they go to the airport, they can hear the announcements directly in their ear as they're walking through the airport and as they hear gate changes. But what the benefit of that will be is when they develop, or if they develop a hearing loss, rather than say, oh, I now need to get a new hearing aid, it'll be like a feature that they'll say, oh, can you please add the hearing aid part to the AirPod? So that it'll be almost like when you buy a car and you say, you know what, can you add the ski rack to the car? It'll be just another feature. And when it becomes just another feature, the hearing aid portion, that will eliminate the stigma, because people are already getting comfortable walking around with things stuck in their ear. And when you just morph it into a hearing aid, it won't be a big deal. It'll be just adding the ski rack to it. And that's my goal, because I think people don't get when people don't wear hearing aids, it's a leading cause of dementia, as Franklin of Johns Hopkins University has documented. And the goal is to eliminate dementia caused by unaddressed hearing loss. And I believe that by morphing these AirPod or AirPod type earpieces into hearing aids, we can help eliminate the stigma, which will then reduce the amount of dementia that ends up happening.
Well, maybe some of the youths that are watching this right now will be able to help work with you and come up with some of these breakthroughs and help people around the world.
Well, I would love that. And I'd love to get youths to also lower the sound on their headsets, because when I see kids on subways listening to music so loud, just as an FYI, the volume should be set in a quiet room, and no one should ever raise the volume louder than what they listen to in a quiet room, because what they're otherwise doing is they're trying to compensate for external noise that their ear doesn't need. And when they go outside and they're trying to, let's say, compensate for the truck or the cars, what they're doing is putting stronger sound against their eardrum than their ear needs. And over time, that creates damage and causes hearing loss.
Yes. In engineering school, they talk to us about the signal to noise ratio.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Well, Janice Lintz, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for working with the Mentor Project. And we wish you the best as time goes on, as you achieve all of the many goals that you have.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you very much.